Well, good morning, everyone. A real pleasure for me to be here at SC08. In the next sort of 10 minutes, I'm going to take the opportunity to tell you a bit about what we've done with Appro. But first, I'm going to just take the opportunity to tell you a bit about F1. I've stopped working on the assumption that nobody from the US knows about F1 because I've met so many people who know a lot more about it than I do. But I still think it's good to set the scene and the size of Formula One and the size of us as a company. So F1 is the largest annual sports series when you consider that the only bigger events are the Olympics and the Football World Cup, or the Soccer World Cup. I keep forgetting I'm in America. So it is a huge global business, and in fact it has become more of a business with all the motor manufacturers being involved in F1 now. So there are some questions at the end that you're going to need to answer, and one of the answers is on this slide. So pay attention around the TV audience that we have for Formula One. I'm not going to give all the answers away. So Renault have been involved in motorsport from the early days. I mean, Mr. Renault himself used to race cars. They've always seen it as a way of promoting their brand, but just the whole fun of sport and being involved in motorsport. It's really important for Renault. Brand awareness, obviously, but they're also seen as a very innovative company. The first team to bring in V10 to Formula One, and also interestingly, the last team to win with a V10 engine. So this slide is very important for those who want to win t-shirts and things at the end, okay? There's some information on here. So we're talking about CFD, and we're talking about how we use CFD tools. So when you look at the stats on the car and the fact that there's over 2 tons of downforce, they say that you could drive the car upside down with that kind of downforce. We've never yet found a driver dumb enough to try it, but we keep hoping so we can prove one day that it is possible to drive the car upside down. Qualifying and the gap between the top drivers and the midfield is very small. We're talking about hundredths of a second can make a big difference. You make one mistake on one corner during your qualifying lap, and that could put you down towards the back of the grid. So very small margins are very important. And the top speed of the car, you may want to note that for later on. So we decided in 2006, our then head of aerodynamics said that the future for us was not going to be building a second wind tunnel. The future for us was going to be CFD, and it was going to be going with CFD in a big way. And so that's what we decided to do. So we initiated a project for a virtual wind tunnel. So the limitations of a wind tunnel is that you have to build a model. We use a 50% scale wind tunnel. You have to build that model. You have to try it. It's very unscientific. You don't know when you put the change on the car whether it's going to make the car better or not, make the model better. And it's a very slow process and takes a long time. And we run 24/7 in our wind tunnel, 365 days a year. There's people there all throughout the year. And they're just constantly testing parts on that car. But you have to make that model. And there's only one wind tunnel, so the capacity is reduced. So by putting in this virtual wind tunnel, as we've done, we've seen at least an 8-fold increase in the amount of work that we can do and the number of simulations we can do. We're seeing at least 3 full car simulations being possible. And obviously with a physical wind tunnel, you're looking at a 50% scale. We don't see CFD replacing the physical wind tunnel completely in the near future. We see it being complementary. So we'll continue to work with the wind tunnel model. And we're going to go to a 60% scale model in the next 12 months. So obviously the major driver for what we do, and I was talking to someone last night and explaining that there's 4 main industries that use the same software we do and the same tools that we do. Aerospace is obvious. The one that may not be is people like the America's Cup, so getting a yacht through water is very similar to what we're doing with a car going through air. And the atomic weapons people are also interestingly doing the same kind of tools and solutions that we are. And a lot of what's driving us, you nearly landed on me. A lot of what's driving us here is that we can't make many changes to the car these days. The engine is frozen for 5 years. The tires are common, so we all use the same Bridgestone tires. You can see the car here. We're all using the same tires. We're all using unleaded 95 fuel, so you can't use any exotic fuels. The driver is obviously a major area that you can make improvements, and there's probably 5 world-class drivers out there, and we happen to have one of them in Fernando Alonso. So the only other area that we can do anything about is aerodynamics, and that's what we spend all of our time at the factory in England where I'm based. That's what we spend all of our time doing, and that's why we've invested so heavily in CFD. The rule changes I should just mention for next year are major rule changes going back to slick tires and major changes in the aerodynamics regulations. And the new regulations lend themselves very well to CFD. So if you look at the car that we've got next to us here, which is from 2006, you'll see that there's little wings and there's little bits sticking up on the car which help with the downforce. All of those are gone from next year. The cars are going to be much cleaner, much narrower rear wings. The front wings are going to look very strange. So I think we're going back to a more pure form of racing again, which I'm really pleased about. I hate all those little winglets that pop up all over the car. I don't think it makes the car look any better. So I was just talking to the guys from Appro last night and saying a year ago at SC07, we still hadn't chosen our vendor. In June this year, we implemented the Appro supercomputer. In August, our CFD team were already putting changes onto the car. We made some improvements to the brake ducts. And here we are a year later, it's been running for 4 months, which is quite incredible when you think about what we've achieved in this last year. So what we did, and the system that we've put in, I've got a couple of slides on the supercomputer itself. You may have heard it being referred to as Mistral if you've watched the video, and I think John referred it to as Mistral earlier. That's the name that we've given the supercomputer. We had a competition amongst all the staff in the factory, and we asked them all to come up with names. I was on the judging panel, and we looked through all the names, from some really weird ones, from someone who wanted to call it Watership Down because we were ripping away the bunnies' homes when we dug away the bank, which I thought was rather weird, to what we thought was quite apt. Renault as a company funded our supercomputer, so obviously a French company, and it's a virtual wind tunnel. So Mistral, which is a wind from France, we thought was rather apt for the name of our supercomputer. So we built it underground. There's a constant temperature of 10 degrees, so it was a really good advantage in putting it underground. A fantastic facility, a wonderful building to take people into, and when they see it, it is very impressive, and the work that the guys are doing there is indeed very impressive. We went to 5 companies and asked them to bid on the work, and we tried not to be too restrictive. We didn't tell them what we wanted them to do. We asked them to come up with a solution for us. We told them it was for CFD. We told them what software we wanted to run on it. So we have CD Adapco, Star CCM, and we also have some code that we're co-developing with Phantom Works, which is a Boeing company. And that was it. And we said to them, right, you come up with the architecture. And the major reason that we went with Appro in the end was because of this open architecture that they have, the high availability. Some of the stuff that John was talking about earlier in terms of the dual rail InfiniBand is really important to us. Keeping that thing available 96 to 98% is far harder than I realized when we first put it in, because I come from a conventional background of servers and high availability clusters. So an HPC is very different for us, and keeping it available and highly available was always going to be the challenge. So working with Appro and with their ACE software, which lets you manage it across the whole cluster, has been really successful for us. So the blade architecture, again, that John showed earlier, is exactly what we implemented. It gives us the scalability that we need. Our room is about half full at the moment, so we have the ability to expand another half of capacity. It's sitting at 38 teraflops now, which I know for some people who are here today, that's not a huge amount. There's hundreds of teraflops out there, I know that. But in terms of Formula One, it is the biggest system in F1. We will continue to grow it. And having this dedicated just to CFD, I think is probably one of the biggest systems dedicated to one application in the world. So we're using, as I said, the code from Star CD, Star CCM, and we're also using the Boeing code. We've grown our CFD team from 9 people to 20, so quite a big growth, and we're seeing a huge amount of benefits, which I'll come on to in a moment, in terms of the throughput and the changes to the car. So this year, the car has already had some improvements on it for both the Valencia and Singapore Grand Prix. Unfortunately, Valencia, Fernando was in an accident in the first corner, so that didn't really help him very much. But it certainly improved the car for the second half of the year, and we started to win races. Someone from Appro last night was telling me that had I noticed that we only started winning races once our new supercomputer went live. I did try to point out that it's probably a coincidence. But the real emphasis is for next year's car. With the rule changes, things are going to be so much more difficult for the teams. And the one who comes out of the box quickest is probably the one who's going to win the championship next year. And that's our expectation, that we're going to be really quick from race 1. This year and last year, we were slow at the beginning of the year. Last year, we never got any quicker, but this year we did all through the season. So our hope is that next year we'll start quick and continue to develop. So you can see there that we stuck it underground. It's a fantastic building, and if you get the chance to see the video that's showing on a loop here in the evenings or during the day, it's quite an amazing place. We've seen some huge throughputs increases for the CFD team. The fact that they can run their full car simulations now at all compared to what they had before. We were running 275 node clusters before, which was okay and was adequate for what we were doing. CFD was contributing about 10% of our aerodynamics output. We're expecting that to grow to 50%. So we expect to see the physical wind tunnel and the virtual wind tunnel each account for 50%. And I guess in the future that may even go further towards CFD. So we believe that with what we've done and the fact that we have the biggest facility, and in the past BMW Sauber have had the largest supercomputer in F1 and definitely saw some huge improvements to their car this year and last year based on what they were doing. We believe we have a competitive advantage now with what we've done. So that's it. I know there's some questions for the audience. I am around if you want to talk to me about the car, which is the more interesting thing, or about the boring IT stuff. I'm happy to talk about that too. So thank you for your time, and I know we've got a couple of questions.
Well, are there any questions from the audience for Graeme about Formula One racing?
Hi, I have a quick question. With the new regulations that you may be asked to focus more on transient simulations in order to get better accuracy of the results that the steady simulations don't give you, that's going to push your computational requirements up. Are you envisioning needing something like 2x computational power next year, or every year a 2x increase of computational power?
Okay, so I mean that's a good question. In terms of where we go from here, I don't think it's entirely clear to us because the regulations change so often. We know that what we've put in now will get us to the middle of next year without any problem. So we know that we have enough capacity and we'll be fine. So we're relying on AMD with the new chips coming out, and we're relying on the fact that this is very scalable and that we can add nodes to it very simply and quite straightforward. So this will grow. I mean, this is just the start for us. It was a huge investment up front, but the fact that it's scalable was a major benefit of what we did.
One question in the back.
How complex is your system? I mean, is it like plain wind simulations, or you're considering tailwind and wind coming from here and there, and how realistic is the simulations really?
Okay, so right now the simulations, we're just mirroring what we did with our old cluster and also what's happening in the wind tunnel. So it's basically wind in a straight direction over the car. What we're now able to do, and what the engineers are working on, and the fact that we've hired 13 more people to come and work with us, is that we want to now simulate two cars behind each other, for example. So try and help us with overtaking. We want to simulate, it's difficult with crosswinds and things like that because the circuits are all so different. When you're comparing Monaco and Monza and Indy, which unfortunately we're not going to at the moment, and Canada, the tracks are very different. So it's difficult to simulate all different track conditions and what wind conditions there could be. But definitely with overtaking, with two cars behind each other, we see a big advantage.
Are there any other questions for Graeme? Thanks, Graeme.
Thank you. Thank you very much.